Hey guys, welcome to the How They Did It podcast. We're here with Dr. Derek Wilcox. He's a strongman, he's a power lifter, he's won the Classic A Highland Games. He actually squatted 1,000 pounds and is the lightest person to do that, which it's insane to even think about squatting 1,000 pounds. One of those being as small and saying that relatively small. He's not small, but relatively small as he was. He's a coach at Wilcox Strength, and he has an amazing experience. We have a plethora of stuff to talk about. I'm a big fan. Whenever one of his videos come up on my feed, I stop, I watch. It's fantastic. And I think you also work with RP Strength. Am I correct?
Yeah, I've been a coach with RP Strength for a decade now.
Oh wow, that's awesome. I didn't even know they had coaching services outside of the application. I started seeing people have RP Strength coach on. So, oh my god, it's interesting.
Yeah, been a really cool ride. I've actually known Dr. Mike for getting close to 2 decades now. So we were in school together, and we had a lot of commonalities. Our paths were kind of running parallel. While he was training bodybuilding, I was training primarily powerlifting and Highland Games and some strongman stuff like that. But we were always super supportive of each other, been great friends.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So I want to ask you. I have a bunch of questions to go down. Some general ideas I thought about, but I actually got something I got interested in a lot recently. And I'd love to hear your take. So I don't know if you know my story at all. I used to be a professional fighter. I was in the UFC for a small period of time. I started out as like an obese kid who then decided to become an MMA fighter at like 16 years old. I'm like, this is what I'm gonna do, and I kind of chased it for like almost 13 years. I finally made it to the UFC. Had a bunch of struggles with yo-yo dieting, and I learned a lot along the way. It became my job by practicing for myself and figuring out how to deal with these problems. I was end up helping other clients. I happened to be fighters most of the time, and then it became general population, and this became my job, and it completely took off in this direction. But I'm curious about something. As a strength coach that trains jiu-jitsu, what is your overall strategy to balancing like your strength training with your jiu-jitsu training, especially when you have competition? Because I think you and your wife are competitive Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioners, correct?
She's competitive. I call myself a participant. She's winning world championships, and I'm just out there doing the best I can, trying to not
Yeah.
look like a fish on dry land.
Well, it's still a competitor. You're still out there competing, all right? You're still out there competing. I respect that.
Yeah. Well, the strength training component of it is primarily handled in different phases. It all depends on what people's goals are and whatever you need at the specific time. The farther out we can start training for a competition, as you know, the better, because you can get a lot more specific planning done. Uh, if body composition changes need to be made, there's a little bit more premise put onto the strength training aspect with, hypertrophy work and things like that while we're dieting so we can retain as much muscle as possible. But getting close to competition time, we start flipping that around. Martial arts sessions or MMA sessions are always put first because the skill specific needs of the nervous system are incredibly vital for timing and skill acquisition and refinement. So we don't want to go into a session like that already fatigued from lifting earlier in the day. So sometimes there's no lifting going on in the last month or even two. Like my background is in lifting. In the previous 2 months before I beat JGF Masters Worlds last year, I just didn't lift because I already had enough force production and my skill was obviously lacking. So I had to I had to work on in higher volumes what I was weakest at. So there's no reason for me to stay in the gym. That's those traits are going to retain themselves good enough. I needed to be as specific to my sport as possible. But other people have strength detriments, and that's a different story. They still need to be lifting.
I think I see this as far, especially when it comes to jiu-jitsu, it seems like quite obvious to me that the guys that take their nutrition and their lifting or their strength conditioning, everyone has different modalities that they generally use. But the guys that add that into their game on average, and I'm not talking about the outliers, generally in the jiu-jitsu room when you walk in, like you see the guy that kind of like he kind of looks like he lifts. Like I'm not even talking about being ripped, or I'm just saying he kind of looks like he lifts. Like that guy normally is like a bit more explosive. He's a bit stronger in these transitions. You kind of know, like, oh, this guy's gonna be a roll. Like, he's gonna be a tough roll. Like, you know it. Like, fuck. When he calls you, like, hey, you gonna go? And you're like, yeah. And you're like, it's gonna be rough. Like, you already know that's coming on. Well, like, not to disparage anybody, but you could see the guy that's kind of like a purple belt, and he obviously doesn't do much weight training. He's not very focused on his diet. Even if his technique is pretty good, and I'm sure he could probably show you a whole bunch of things, when it comes into the actual physical practice, there is a slowdown. Uh, if you add like a general guideline for jiu-jitsu athletes, especially guys that are into jiu-jitsu, they're like, hey, I want to compete. But like you said, I'm talking about participants, using your word, because I like it. That was pretty good. Participants. Someone that's like, hey, I want to participate in all the fun. I don't care. It's like being the world champion isn't like my number one goal in life. But I'm cool with having some fun. I want to compete good. How high do you add hypertrophy training or strength training of some sort in that to help you, especially during the times you're in a beginner?
Well, the nice thing about being a beginner in that aspect is you make tons of gains from very little training. So you have maximum efficiency in that way. If you only lift, twice a week, it'll actually be a really, really big difference. But when I have people in that regard, it's almost like training a kid. Like the best way to get results from a kid is let them go from like age 10 to 14. Then they're magically going to be incredible athletes after that. Just doing barely enough to create enough progress there. But as people become more advanced, that's when things get a lot more complicated. And if you're really talking about the participants, the people who aren't as competitively minded, they just want to enjoy it to a large degree, but they don't want to make the full life commitment to be a world champion, things like that, then you have to start thinking longevity. And resistance training is one of the best ways to stabilize your joints in a sport that literally attacks those joints. You're having dynamic movements and you have all kinds of rotations in movement, like with your hips, when they're not voluntary. Sometimes your hip
Yeah.
gets forced into internal rotation. And if you don't have that mobility, your knee blows apart. That you have to, one, have the skill to go with those techniques, but also you need to have the active range of motion and the stability in the joint so that things don't rupture. Those are the biggest attributes for strength training for that level of person.
Yeah, it's funny. I had this. I know this firsthand. So I didn't start really strength training seriously until basically the tail end of my career. Kind of, I had like moments where I would get into it. Like I had once a really good strength conditioning coach. He worked with basketball players, and he would have me lift just like basic hypertrophy work. Because a lot of what I was doing with the yo-yo dieting is I would have all these improvements in the skill. I was training like harder than I could ever imagine training, but then it would go back from like this extreme training diet till I'm dying to fight, win, whatever happens, then explode with chocolate cake and not even like, I'm not even going to like touch. I'm not even going to go to the weight room. Like go to the weight room seems insane. Like I might go for a run, but I'm not going to go to the weight room. Like that. I would just wait till I'm dying of starvation to do my weightlifting. Like the complete opposite. And I felt it. I felt it throughout the years. Like I always had knee injuries. My one quad, ever since I blew out my knee twice, is smaller than the other. I never helped those deficiencies. At some point, I wasn't able to really shoot anymore. I wasn't able to like deal with scrambles and awkward positions. And it didn't took me till actually I started lifting, pulling back from the other training, start lifting, kind of getting into like the bodybuilding, weightlifting side of things, and kind of for fun. I was already at the end of my career. I knew it was over, and I was like, oh man, I can shoot takedowns again. Holy crap! Like how'd that happen? Like man, I can. I got put on my back. I got up, and I knew my knee was in a weird situation, and it was able to stand up without creaking or popping or whatever. And I think that that's such a huge component. And I know we're off on a tangent on jujitsu right now, but I just felt because we're both jujitsu guys, we can nerd out a bit on it. Like I feel like that's such an important component that people are missing in the sport, that you need so much quote unquote armor to get through the daily practices.
Yeah, definitely. And performance wise, it also works in a similar way. And There are pros and cons to lifting before you get into jujitsu, as far as just like in your career, and then also starting in jujitsu younger, acquiring the skills and then lifting afterward because you understand leverages to a much larger degree. The Helio Gracie scenario where you have the smaller person that has to have all the skills perfectly refined to get a sweep on a larger person or find leverage somewhere. We actually saw this a lot in the golfers I've worked with over the years. The smaller golfers tended to have really good short games. So the coach that I worked under started recruiting smaller players who had super good short games, those really refined, hard to develop skills. And he knew that over the 4 years of eligibility that they had working in our strength conditioning program, the distance was going to come. And it would only encourage, or yeah, really encourage the total package of development for those players because eventually they would be driving the ball over 300 yards, but they would still have as good or better of a short game at that point too.
Are doing something like that, like you're building a strength program for a golfer, let's say, are you looking at him going like, "Hey, let me put on 20 pounds of muscle on you, and then we're going to slowly transfer that into strength. Start with like a hypertrophy block, then we're going to do a strength block, and we're going to keep going back and forth that, and then eventually it's just gonna, as you're practicing, going to lead the 300 yard. I'm not good at golf, but drive.
Yeah, drives. Yeah.
Drive. Or is it like, okay, we need to develop his hips, his quads, his calves. That's our main focus, and that's how we're starting out the program. Like, which way do you do this when you're trying to program someone specific like that?
Well, the really nice thing about working with golfers is they're almost always really weak.
True.
So when you can improve their general strength through just the basics, properly executed squats, pulls, presses, things like that, most of the upper body work is just done for stability because they're not really generating much force with their upper body. It's mostly lower body. But if you can stabilize their shoulders, the more stable those are in general, later in the round when they're more fatigued, especially if they start getting dehydrated, then their consistency is still going to be there when they're tired, especially in 3 4 day long tournaments. So strength has functions in that way as well. It factors into endurance and resilience at the end of a hard round. But yeah, just the basics for most of the time until I've had, I think, just a small handful of golfers that ever got up close to a double body weight squat. It's like full depth, well below parallel weightlifting style squat. And by that point, we can add in more plyometrics. We can be more explosive in training modalities. But up to that point, just gaining muscle is going to bring every attribute with it, whether it's endurance, explosiveness, overall strength, everything.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, and I think that's important to hear for a lot of people that are athletes or hybrid athletes in some sense. That they're, even if they're hobbyists, like, because I know a lot of guys, obviously, a lot of people that came to me even as a personal trainer, their goal ended up being, I started realizing that all their goal was actually just to lose weight. And there was like masqueraded as, I also want to be good at boxing and jiu-jitsu. Like that was like in the background, but a huge part of what they actually wanted was just to get in shape. So that's why I changed my focus to being like, oh, I need to understand the basics of hypertrophy training. I have to understand nutrition very well because this is where I'm able to get the most bang for my buck for my clients. So as I got into it, though, I started seeing that a lot of my clients that came from that world, they're like, "Man, yeah, I want to train, but I want to do good. I want it to be good for my jiu-jitsu. I want it to be good for my boxing." And most of the people that started, I believe that they were in such like a beginner stage that it's like, all of this is good for your boxing and your jiu-jitsu. Any of this, and all of this is going to be beneficial. And I mean, maybe if you were like like a specialized athlete, and this is where you're like making your living, we could really make some tweaks. But if you want to look good and make it help you at jiu-jitsu, just doing a hypertrophy program 2 days a week, getting on your diet correctly will make giant changes. Is that something you agree with this, my sentiment?
100%. Yeah, you have to cover the basics before training should ever get close to being considered changing to something more complicated. Most of the time, complications don't even come for advanced athletes until you start working around injuries. You have to start figuring out more creative ways to work around those injuries, but also limit their fatigue so that they can practice their actual sport more effectively.
And this is another thing I actually want to bring up to you. I think is kind of interesting, and it's on the similar topic. When we talk about strength training, like you lifted 1,000 pounds squat. I'm sure there's bodybuilders, and this is I think an important. I'm kind of switching context, but it made me think of it. When you're squatting like 1,000 pounds, there's bodybuilders that are much larger than you, more muscular. That would you put 1,000 pounds on their back? That's not moving anywhere. And this is something that I see with a lot of my clients in the beginning where they confuse the strength and hypertrophy relationship. And they will go and be like, they want to get bigger. They are worried that being bigger won't make them stronger. And will say a comment like, look at this guy who squatted 1,000 pounds. He's not that big, but look at this bodybuilder. He's much bigger and not weak. You see, bigger muscles don't mean more strength. But there is a correlation. It's just different. Maybe you can walk it through, and then I'll give you my opinions afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. The gaining the actual muscle mass, specifically contractile tissue that actually develops force, you have to have a prerequisite amount of that to be able to do much of anything close to your potential. So I had to lift weights. I started off very small. When I started lifting weights, I was right around 100 pounds. And I ate like a madman forever as a kid, all the way through high school, through college for several years. And I averaged maybe 10 pounds gained per year up until I got over 200 pounds. That's when that slowed down a little bit because I had to stay in my weight classes. When you develop that moderate amount of muscle, enough to bench press 1.5 times your body weight or squat double body weight, the physics start changing a little bit. And leverage with the muscle that you've gained also changes. There's an old adage of powerlifting, you don't start getting good leverages for your squats and bench press and things like that until you weigh at least 3 pounds per inch you are tall. So that's where you start seeing powerlifters start looking like, close to a fire hydrant size. Some people push that to like 4 pounds per inch. That's where you
Yeah,
get the real bowling balls out there. But
right.
the uh, the whole premise behind that is once you get to that basic level, because I think until that point you're still in the beginner phase. Past that, you become an intermediate, and then once you really have to start managing fatigue because your strength has advanced to a very, very large degree, then you have to start thinking in more advanced terms of fatigue management and different training specifics that are really catered to the individual because everybody's different to a large degree at that point. But once you get past that beginner stage, you can start thinking more about neural adaptations and sport specificity and things like that because powerlifting in itself is incredibly skill specific. You have to hit the exact same technique at the optimal angles on every single joint to make sure you're as efficient as possible to make your lifts. For squat, that's the whole reason that I had the technique that I did. It's a very wide stance, but I train my hips to be very mobile to where my knees are almost out at 180 degrees, so I can stay perfectly upright. Because believe it or not, I don't want to lean forward at all with 1,000 pounds on my back. That's a really big strain. So I'm basically doing a balancing act with a vertical spine with the bar in a high bar position, so I'm in the most efficient position to handle that.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember from my personal journey, because I had always a bunch of problem with my knees. Once I would get to strength conditioning coaches, the times I would train, a lot of them would try to put me under the squat bar. I was always very glute dominant because of my knees. Like, so I would squat my hips. One, I have bad lever, like my femurs are long. I'm not built for squatting straight well.
That makes it
Uh,
tough.
it makes it tough. Yeah, to keep my balance. My head really has to come forward, and I would load weight on the bar. I mean, I was not strong, but for my size, considering how much I lifted, like, oh, the coach was like, man, you're not bad. It's funny though, my legs never got much, where it actually bothered me, never got much stronger. And it wasn't until I really took hypertrophy training seriously, and I remember I changed even the style of squats. Like, one, if I have a safety bar squat, I take a safety bar squat. I would put heels under my feet to really push it forward, and I'd have my hands kind of out, almost not letting me go forward, and try to squat straight down. And I know it's like, oh, I have to cut the weight down by like 1/4 of what I was doing to get anything, any kind of reps, and I'm still weak. And it's like, oh man, I haven't been using my quads at all. Like I basically been deadlifting with the squat bar, kind of, and like getting enough bend to make it work. But yeah, biomechanically it was off, and I was strong. I mean, I was getting stronger, but I wasn't building what actually needed to be built, which later on let me. Now I can wrestle. I tried to do it very lightly because I'm old and beat up, but I can.
I hear you, man. Yeah, it's a whole different deal when you're training to lift the most that you can in a powerlifting sense, and then when you're training for sport specificity, because it doesn't matter in your sport how much you can squat. It indirectly attributes to different skills in your sport, but that number specifically is not going to get you more goals in a basketball game. It's not going to get you more touchdowns. You can't just say, "Hey, I squat 500 pounds. I used to squat 400. I should score more goals this year." Like, it doesn't really work like that. So there's diminishing returns there to some degree. But the nice thing with working with athletes is if your athlete can only squat 150 pounds to full depth in good position, they might be able to low bar squat and change their form and kind of like what you were talking about, manufacture a squatting movement and lift more weight. But if you can put them in a position of biomechanical efficiency that trains the muscles that they are working in those sports, even if they can only squat that 150 pounds, if you can get them in that position to squat 200 pounds, your transfer to performance is going to be a lot higher.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I'm actually curious about this too. I'm going to transition a bit into your coaching because you I've seen like a lot of your workout videos and they look like a ton of fun. I think you have the workout in your garage, right? Mostly. Yeah. So you got like a whole gym set up there, which is awesome. It's a goal of mine one day when I'm done traveling to make my own garage gym. But yeah, it looks like it's a ton of fun. Like you had a lot of strength movements, a lot of different rep ranges. When I program for clients, one of the things I've changed over the years is, especially when I first got into the science based approach, is I was like, this is kind of what these people smarter than me have done these studies. This seems like the right program. I'm going to build your program like this. I am not going to like give enough flexibility for you to be like, I don't like this. I like this, in the sense of like, I want to do overhead press. Like, oh, we hit your upper delts in all these other exercises. Forget about doing overhead press. Dr. Mike said something once, and he said he called it spirit animal shit. Like some things are just cool for spirit animal shit. And I was like,
Yeah.
man, that's so true. Like sometimes I'd go to the gym to do overhead press just because I'm strong at overhead press. It makes me feel good when the bar goes over my head. Like my monkey brain is like, yeah, strong. And it's great, and that gets me going to the gym. I'm excited on the day that I'm going to do my overhead press. That puts me in the gym. I'm curious, and that keeps me in. And so I change that myself. Like I'll add shit that's like this. Maybe for sure isn't the most optimal way to get the most jack possible, but this keeps me in the gym for, I'll find less excuses to not show up when I'm jet lagged and I can't get up in the morning. If I'm excited to go and at least attempt it, I could force it through. And same with my clients, I would see them do it. I wonder how much in your personal training and how much with your clients do you add spirit animal shit when you're doing their programming.
I tell my clients all the time, I'm always open to feedback and suggestion. The big thing, if I'm going to get that back from a client, because most of my clients are remote, so I don't get to talk to them in person. We don't work in person together that much. So I'm always open to suggestion 100%, but they better have a really good reason that trumps the reason that I wrote the program the way that I did. And sometimes they do. Like there's a factor I didn't know about. Like there's a variable that got introduced. Like, yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Let's switch out this exercise. Usually when something hurts, we can work around it. Or there's a specific piece of equipment that's not exactly what I thought it was, and the exercise isn't working out. That's totally fine. That's kind of the number one rule about being a coach in general. Is like you kind of coach with your ears most of the time, whether they know what they're saying to you or not, as far as what's important. So but yeah, it's a double-edged sword. And if you would ask me in my powerlifting days if I did spirit animal lifts or ego lifts in the gym, sometimes maybe in a weight that I selected, if I was extra amped up, I might lean that way. But I was always trying to think of the most effective method to improve my lifts on the platform. What I did in training didn't matter in the least, but
Yeah.
I would try to be the most optimal there because I had the competitor's mindset. All
Yeah.
that mattered was improving my chance of winning on the platform or breaking the record that I had my eye on at the time. Now, I am much less motivated to go into that gym that I built for myself that you were talking about. No matter, how nice it is and how much I love it, there are a lot of days I just don't want to go out there. So I will tend to lean towards, okay, well, let's start off with something fun and then we'll get the quality work in after that. Because it doesn't matter how perfect your training plan is, if you don't go in and do it, the adherence is always the number one variable at play there. So you got to get in there and figure out a way to make it fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that I feel like it's like a missing component is that, yes, with athletes, things I think have to be much more specific, right? Like if you have a goal, even if like you're a jujitsu athlete and you're lifting weights, I think like you should really watch out with what you're doing. Like you're in there to kind of get the best of both worlds, but because you're doing both worlds, like you need to be a little more specific on what you're doing and plan it out. But if you're just like, I want to get to the gym as much as I possibly can in the week, I'm a busy guy, I'm a dad, I got a business to run, I'm working a job that takes 12 hours a day, and I need to get in there 4 times a week somehow, hook or crook. Like, yeah, if what motivates you is like, some heavy bench press, cool. Like warm up good, keep your technique good. Like even if going for 3 reps isn't the best for hypertrophy, if that gets you in the gym more often because you're willing to do it, that's what excites you throughout the week. Because there is something to just like, man, I'm going to get these big 3 reps. You get these big numbers, and it just feels monkey brain stuff. It feels good.
Yeah, it appeals to the brainstem a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So and sometimes that's all you need to get somebody in the gym. And I started doing this a lot with my clients, where we kind of like added like every workout we had like one main lift that was our lift of the day. Like it could be like for my one client now, especially the ones I'm traveling with, not the online ones. The online ones we do this too, but I'll have like flat bench press with dumbbells. We're just going to like get the maximum 5 rep max we can with those. And we're going to do the heaviest 5 rep max we could do for hip thrust, or 8 rep max we could do. We just pick a number, and like that's kind of like it's still working towards our goal, but it's also our fun. Like we go in there, like that's what's pumped up. Did we did it last week? I'm gonna get it. Oh, I have it. Let's see what you got. We're talking shit to each other, and that's his moment to like. And we hit the 5. There's high fives. It keeps the game going. And then yeah, we gotta do lateral raises now. Sorry, gotta do 7 sets of lateral raises. We gotta fit it in. But if you didn't have that fun part, and it was just like, probably he might get bored. That guy doesn't come in, and then he actually doesn't get the results.
Right. That's I talked to people a lot about this while I was in grad school. So I was a little bit older when I was getting my master's and PhD than a lot of other people in the program. So I took several years off during undergrad, mostly to focus on my competitive career with powerlifting. And I would just work and save money and then go back to school eventually. But I had to explain a lot of times that people would come up with these super ornate and detailed training plans that they wanted their athletes to do. I was like, yeah, that's great. But when you would go watch them interact with their athletes, they didn't have that magic. And honestly, coaching is about 10% knowledge of physiology and biology and things like that, and understanding how to develop a training plan or do athlete monitoring protocols, things like that. 90% of coaching is the art of dealing with people. And you have to invest yourself into that much more than anything else. You have to develop empathy. You have to keep your ears on. You don't want to just talk over people. Like you have to understand who you're working with, why they're there, and what their priorities are. And it sounds like you really tap into that really well because you find people's motivations, you feed into it to keep them coming back to where Sure, on paper, going heavy for one set, maxing out on something might not be the perfect progression in some macro cycle, whatever, but it gets them in there. They're motivated, they're having fun, and you're still getting in a ton of good work consistently. Consistency is going to beat everything else most of the time anyway.
Yeah, it just I felt like it. I realize that a lot of people are like me in the same sense. Like that kind of gets me going. Like I had like this goal to do above 20 pull-ups, and I was like, that was like every other workout I did, cool. I pushed, it was great, But when the day that woke me up in the morning, I was like, oh, it's time, let's go. Get my protein shake in. I'm drinking coffee. I'm heading to the gym. My wife's like, what's going on? I'm playing Rocky music in my ears. I'm ready to like roll. It's like, what is wrong with this? I don't. I got competitive. I last week I did 19. This is 20. This week is 20. And it's like that got me going. And I would do that, and I'm like, man, this is working for me. This probably work for a lot of other people. And everybody's a little bit different. Some people are like, I'm just here to optimize. I'm like, I got some people I work with, they're CEOs, they're high level people, and they're just like, listen, Tony, what's the ABC I need to do? I need to be in and out of here in 45 minutes. I don't got any time. I don't want to think about this again the rest of the day. What do I have to do? What do I have to eat exactly? All right, see you later. Bye. And they're like, everything's like that. And that's cool. That's easy. That's actually easy. But I feel like it's harder for the people that aren't like that. Because people are like that, you're just like A B C D. They're like A B C D done, got this done. Check it off the list. Call my PA. Let her know that I'm eating the rest of the day, and then it's gone. That's much easier.
Definitely. That's the art, man.
So I wanted to walk. I wanted to ask you something from your experience on social media recently, because you started growing on social media. I've been watching your stuff. I really enjoy it. I feel like you got some great stuff out there. How do you feel the landscape now in the fitness of social media is? Like you're seeing a lot of, the advice coming out right now is always a little bit crazy from a lot of people. Like we have like these over the top ideas. But I think that there's more of a science based community to be positive than ever before. But it's a very competitive landscape. How do you feel as a coach in this current landscape, posting on social media with the whole environment of social media around you? How does it all affect you and affect your coaching, if it does at all?
Yeah, I'm sure it does. Because I honestly, if it wasn't for the marketing for the business and being a coach with RP, I wouldn't be on social media. I don't think it's the healthiest thing in the world, but it's incredible for marketing. And I get to interact with a lot of people who want to be interacted with in that world. So, and it's cool. But just like anything else, it's kind of like what it used to be on the internet with people coming out with fad diets and crazy workouts, trying to show that they reinvented the wheel when human physiology hasn't changed since we really started studying sports science about 100 years ago and understanding physiology to a deeper degree. The basics will always work. And if you try to come up with some crazy scheme that's going to revolutionize things or change your genetics or something, it's just not a real thing. So, and I think people who are willing to research a little bit are finding that out. The basics work. It's all in how you perform them. And I tell people all the time, I sell workouts. I'm a coach for that. But if you lift heavy, lift often, have good technique, and you manage your fatigue, you're going to be successful. Like those are the four main keys that I tell people all the time. And I try to do it in a real refined way that's predictable and long-term sustainable. But if you have those key components, you're going to do well. But a lot of times, what you see on Instagram or YouTube, people just going crazy and going for glory lifts. They're not tapping into their spirit animal. They're trying to live as their spirit animal, and it's been going on long enough. Social media has been around, what is it, 15 years now, maybe close to 20. We're starting to see a lot of the people come and go who go crazy and do lifts just for the gram, and you see them eventually get hurt, or you see them have kidney failure, or you see them have a random heart attack. And I'm hoping, and I think I see this happening a good bit with the younger folks because the gym I go to actually has a ton of high school kids at it. Uh, I think they're seeing a lot more of the total path of how those stories go and the risks that are associated, because I've talked to those kids and they're like, yeah, I don't want to have a heart attack when I'm 30 like this guy did. I don't want to tear my pec off and look, asymmetrical forever because I went too heavy. Like they're getting educated. They're exposed to a lot more good information, but there's so much information out there they get exposed to the bad stuff too.
For sure. I see this a lot in, especially from the nutrition side of things, because my company does training in nutrition. And the nutrition side of things, a lot of clients are like, oh, I followed this influencer and I really want to look like him. He has a six pack like this. And it's like there's this constant battle of trying to be like, look, one, that doesn't make the information he's saying good or bad. There is, I would even say you can at least lean towards it's probably somewhat good because at least he's ripped. But a lot of that has to do with genetics. It could be due what kind of special supplementation he's taking, because who knows? I'm not saying it has to be the case, but it might be the case.
Only if they're stronger and bigger than you.
Only if they're stronger or bigger than me. Then for
Yeah.
sure they're on supplementation. That's basically everybody. I don't know how we got that much of the world got some population, got enough money for this, but okay. They're gonna have a yam shortage soon. Like I don't know, like if we're like if that like that is a real situation. I see it, and then people will be like, oh, well, what? How do I say ripped all year round? I'm like, do you want to be ripped all year round? Like if you started and you had to lose 50 pounds to get to where you are, being there, getting ripped is going to be a very big lifestyle change for you to do. It's going to be harder than it is going to be for this 20-odd-year-old kid that, he was born at 15% body fat and he went down to 11. Like, yeah, you were 38% body fat and now you're down to like 12. And it's huge and that's awesome, but like it's not going to be the same. Do you run into that as a coach at all?
Constantly. Constantly. And it's hard to avoid it because on social media, the people with the biggest followings are the freakiest looking people. And the way we are hardwired, our physiology and psychology is not made to be able to understand, okay, we're only seeing the tiniest itty bitty fraction of the most elite people who have the greatest appeal visually, basically on the entire planet at once. As soon as we're scrolling through our phone, we're only seeing like the best of the best. And we start thinking like the more you're exposed to that over and over again for a long enough period of time, you start thinking, oh, that's normal.
Yeah.
But it is the absolute exception to every rule that there is. There's a reason that people are drawn to those people. It's because they're so incredibly rare in real life. And you start thinking, well, why don't I look like that? And it's just for most of the time, it's not in the cards for people. About 60% of your likelihood of success in professional sports is developed just from genetics. There's so many factors. If you think about that in powerlifting terms with drug tested and untested organizations, there's only about a 10% difference with steroids. So if you think steroids have a really big deal as far
Yeah.
as performance goes, genetics is 6 times that amount of variance. So
That's insane. And that's insane. People don't like to hear that, but it's obviously so true. I, as a quick story, some recently my client was like, I bet you can't get down. He had gotten really lean. We got down to like 7% body fat. It was like he was super lean, even to the point that I was kind of like, ah, man, like you're not competing. Like I get it. It's kind of cool that we're doing this, but this is now we're starting to get in these uncomfortable territories health wise. Like let's go build back up. But he's like, I bet you can't get back down to single digit body fat. And like we go back and forth. He's like, I make a bet with you. You can't do it in 12 weeks. I was heavy and I went on this super calorie restrictive diet while I'm traveling. So I'm basically doing like a protein sparing modified fast. But I'm traveling somewhere along the lines of I'm in a plane once every 4 days to another country. So it was really hard to like balance the sleep and that. But I end up getting down to the single digit body fat. And I get down there around, whatever between what the DEXA scan was saying, there was a margin of error of some sort. But around there, I was very lean. So I got down and he was like, don't you want to stay here? And I was like, No, absolutely not. Like, this is so hard. Like, I know I don't have to be this strict to stay here, and I could slip. But I just want to enjoy my life. Like lifting, I think it's so important to remind me, like, this is for you to enjoy your life better. Now, if you're obese or unhealthy or over fat or under muscled, it's part of, like, I think it should be part of your own personal responsibility to yourself to build and get stronger, better. But to go to those far extremes, a lot of the times I'm like, I don't think you guys think you're going to get there and you're going to love it. And I've been, not a genetic freak, but I've been very lean before. And from my experience, it didn't change my life. I wasn't any happy. I was less happy. I could guarantee that. I was overall less happy. Like, and I think a lot of clients, they misunderstand that they think they're going to get to these levels, and they hear these guys talking about what alphas they are and they're super lean on the beach and like, oh, this is going to be awesome. I'm like, I think it's you guys don't understand how difficult it might be for you, and how much more difficult it might, how much easier it might be for them.
Yeah. There are always trade-offs with that lifestyle. People don't understand that. They look at the short clip that's 90 seconds on Instagram or the like 5-minute video on YouTube and think, I've only invested 5 minutes into observing this person and seeing what they do. Surely they just go off and live this normal life like I do outside of this. Like, no, it's probably their job to look like that because of the views, because you were watching that and a whole millions of other people are watching it just like you. Like they get a direct financial return because of people like you that watch. And that's cool. Like it's a pretty sweet way to make a living, but it's also not going to last forever. Just like anything else, it's a tough thing, but conceptually, I'm always having to explain that because I'll get, somebody will send me an Instagram reel or pictures or something like that. I'm like, well, first off, these are probably touched up. There's some editing going on. You
Yeah,
can't compare yourself to that. Is this your entire life? Is this your job? Because that's their job. There's a
yeah,
reason you guys don't look the same. One from genetics and lifestyle and incentives, and like you've got 3 kids at home. Like that's going to make things a little bit different. You have tons of responsibilities that they don't have because they have funneled everything that they do in their life to looking like that with a little bit of touch up. So it's all about perspective there.
yeah. I see that. I see that a lot. I'm glad you say it. And talking sometimes with coaches too, especially like I talked with Max Coleman recently, and we touched on the subject. And I think it's kind of important because I feel like we are entering a world now where we're having more availability to drugs. Like it's way easier to get stuff like GLP-1 agonists, which is fantastic. And I'm really happy that these drugs do exist and they can help people. I coach a lot of people that do take the drugs to try to maintain muscle mass and like some basic things to do to help during that process. But I think now that these drugs are being a lot more available, and they're stuff like even getting testosterone is it's basically easy. There's almost no real boundary to getting it in most states. That it's like okay, great. I'm all for everything you guys are doing. Everyone wants to do with their life. I'm a libertarian anyway. I believe everyone should do whatever they want to do. But I think people should be cautioned in what they're going into. Like, if you're just trying to keep getting skinnier and skinnier and skinnier, and now you got a GLP-1 agonist you could shoot into your stomach, and this is something I've dealt with clients in the past, where I have to like step into with their doctor and like sit down and be like, no, you don't understand. You're you're aiding in body dysmorphia. Like he is having an issue right now, and like you or she is having an issue, and you are like using
Facilitating. Yeah.
facilitating. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. Facilitating that to have. I was like, late at night. It's late at night. Yeah, facilitating that. I think that's important for people to remember to like come back to reality a bit. Like it's not all it's cracked up to be, and it's going to take a massive sacrifice for most people, and it might take so much more of a sacrifice for you than it did for them, just genetically, just because like
Right.
it's the way the cookie crumbles. That, and I think that's important to remind people so then they're like not beating themselves up. Like, why is this so hard for me? Why is this not hard for them?
Right. Yeah, I use the analogy of playing cards all the time with that. Like we at the beginning of a hand, we're all dealt a set of cards, and that's basically our genetics. or the circumstances that we have in life. And you can only play the cards that you've got in your hand. You can't play with anybody else's. Like, you've got what you've got. And people can get awful creative with what they've got. People can be extremely successful and figure out ways, whether it's, sometimes it's a bluff, but you
Yeah.
can figure out ways to make what you've got work. And that's what you have to focus on. You can't focus on what you don't have. You got to optimize what you do and keep pushing that and pushing and pushing and pushing until you eventually get where you want to be.
That's awesome. So I'm gonna ask a couple questions I got for you that are more just about you because I'm curious. Do you have any like goals right now? Like, do you have body composition goals, or do you have any powerlifting goals? I think in 2024 you played in the Highland Games again, if am I correct? So you are you still competing? Is it jujitsu? What's your mostly your focus now?
All those things, actually. I'm in a weight loss phase right now, so I can get down close to around 200 pounds. Started close to 220 after the holidays, thanks to my mother-in-law's incredible confectionery skills and Kansas City barbecue combined with that. It's a devastating combo.
Oh,
It's
I'm
like a
done. I'm
left,
already
left,
tapped out.
right, straight to the face. uh, but yeah, I've got my first Highland Games planned either at the end of March or mid April. And I just found out that they bumped up the number for the lightweight division up to 200 pounds in the Highland Games. And when I started, 15 years ago, it was always 190, and nobody really ever did it. So I had no idea, and I was always like right above the lightweight. So I was competing with the 6'5", 300-pound people, and I'm 5'7", 220 at my
Yeah.
heaviest. So, so I'm doing that to get down to that weight class, but I'm also doing IBJJF pans in
Oh, cool.
jujitsu at purple belt.
Oh,
So,
nice.
so I'll get down to my whatever it is, 207, 208 weight class with the gi on, mat side weigh-ins, so there's no cutting involved. But I want to be, fresh, be able to eat good that day. So I'm going to be just a little bit light. And a lot of times that helps with endurance, especially with mat side weigh-ins. People go in there cutting and you see it about 3 to 4 minutes into that match, like they gas hard. So it's a
Yeah.
very difficult thing to manufacture a weight cut mat side weigh-ins. So yeah, I've got those things coming up and, maybe I never really have much ab definition. I just kind of have ab suggestion. So I'll probably get back in that realm too.
Yeah, it's good. That's good. It's funny you say that about the weight cutting with I like we develop with a lot of our athletes that do jiu-jitsu. Basically how we do the weight cuts is we don't actually cut weight. Well, we'll do like if we have time, which we don't always, we'll do like a diet phase, like kind of as far out as we can, lose as much weight coming into it, and then increase calories going into the tournament, and then week of the tournament or a few days before, like 2 3 days before, we kind of change what we're eating. Like a lot of times we'll lower the fiber like 2 days before the weigh-in, the fight day. All the carbs are like simple carbohydrates, super easy to digest protein. We're drinking like electrolyte drinks and stuff to keep our hydration levels up. And we're drinking water, and we're kind of just like minimizing the amount of food and GI
Yep. Clearing the
inside the
GI tract.
blood, in the clear GI tract. So when the fighters get on the scale, they're as light as possible, but still fully fed. They still have had like this like protein shake bowl of cereal like a little bit before the weigh-ins, like, and they kind of went to the bathroom, they peed, they came back, they're down like point 0.2. They all kind of balance out. They're like the lightest, but still the best they feel. And it's funny that a lot of my clients I do this with, they freak out when I'm like, yeah, like look, we like having a Rice Krispie treat probably is like not a bad idea, like what close to the mat, and they're like, a Rice Krispie treat? Like, are you kidding me? I'm like, man, it's it's like it's light, it's it's super quick digesting carbs. You're gonna be burning that energy, you need it. Like, yeah, I don't it's
Easy to
probably the
eat.
best time. And it's delicious. I mean, that's just a plus.
Absolutely. And that's
Yeah.
Rice Krispie treats are literally one of my go-tos for a lot of people and myself for those reasons exactly. Like they're awesome for supporting performance in that specific time. And like what you were talking about, the one of my favorite quotes in sport nutrition going through school that I heard, and I parrot it to this day from Dr. Brad DeWeese. there's no such thing as a bad food at all. There's only bad applications of food because everything can have a purpose one way or another in the right context.
But yeah, 100%. I agree with that. And I have a personal question that I'm actually working towards. I would love to have your opinion. Since I got you on here, I'm about to sneak some free advice from you. So bang, look at that. I'm actually looking to get to 200 pounds. That's my goal. My goal is 200 pounds at the body weight I am right now. Like I did an in body right today, which obviously is a bit off. It was like 16%. Say I'm 16 to 22% body fat, wherever I am. I can kind of have a couple of abs at the top, but I'm not like lean. I want to be there in 200 pounds. And I've been asking this question a lot because I've had a bunch of people on the podcast. I had this girl named the Scientific Snitch. She just recently was on. I had Max Coleman was on. And I was asking like, there's been this kind of like anti-bulking movement or main gaining movement recently. Are that like you don't need to be hypertrophy is a stimulus driven response, and being in like much of a surplus are I guess even the way they described surplus was like a point of contention between a few of the guests that I had. But to make it easy for simple-minded me, they were like being in a small surplus basically was the way to go through this and not change your body shape too much, not put on that much fat. Instead, my original idea was I was going to cut down, get lean, and then try to build up again. I'm curious what approaches would you use for something like that?
Yeah, well, the research has been super interesting on that. That's come out in the last few years, showing that the net difference in muscle gained with higher surpluses doesn't really support with the mass monster bulking phases that we used to see a lot. Guys with Dr. Mike actually talked about this. I knew Dr. Mike when he was going from like 200 pounds up to 275 or so. And Mike's only 5'5". Like
Yeah.
there wasn't a whole lot for that weight to go. So, but that was the thing. That's all we knew. And we thought the bigger surplus, the bigger rate of gain that we would have on the muscle. But it turns out like there's not much of a net difference. If you have a surplus consistently, and that, really it seems like we only need maybe 500 calories of surplus per day, maybe. And even from that, there's so much variance in what was your previous diet like? What is your training like? There's of course the genetic factors, and there's never a perfect way to calculate those numbers anyway, unless you're in an environmental chamber 24 hours a day and have all your food weighed. Um, but yeah, I usually try to start with 250 to 500 calories per day in a surplus, but that's in theory. Because I'll pull the curtain back a little bit, Wizard of Oz style. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Every nutrition plan anybody makes in the industry is an educated guess
Yeah.
because we have to send it. Hopefully, it gets followed consistently, and then we
Thank
watch
you much.
numbers. Right? Don't tell anybody though. This is just between
Yeah.
us.
Yeah, you can. No one know.
Right. But we have to monitor numbers to see what that actually does because there's so much variance of how people actually follow those plans, the foods that they choose, how accurate are the nutrition labels. There's so many things that are out of not just our control, but of the client's control as well. So really, you just have to go with something, be consistent, and after usually about 2 weeks is my assessment window, we can make changes after that point if we don't see the movement that we want. If we see too much movement, I don't always reduce calories. A lot of times I'll stay there and wait for that increase in body weight to start slowing down. And then we'll hold at the body weight long enough to where the total amount of time, whether it's 6, 7, 8 weeks, whatever, the average rate of gain is where we want it. Then we can make another bump up in calories. That's the biggest thing. Looking in the macro scale, aim for like, that 0.25 to 0.5% body weight gain per week. And when you hit that mark, you're in pretty much the Goldilocks zone where you're not gaining too much too fast.
That I love that. All right, one last question. I'm letting you go because it's almost 2 in the morning here. We're going hard. I'm not. This is way past my bedtime. That's why the words are getting mixed up. Everything's moving
Oh man,
around.
I
But
appreciate you sticking it out for real.
No, man. No, thank you for coming on. I was like, there's no way I'm missing it. My plans changed so crazy. I can't even tell what's gonna happen tomorrow. I'm going back to the States in like 5 days. It's nuts. Uh, but last question I'll ask you to close out. When you had the 1,000 pounds on your back and you lifted it up, can you walk me through like how that? I can't even imagine what that feels like. Like the tendons, you're shaking. Are you hearing cracks? You're feeling your spine compress. Like what's actually going on under basically a half a house on you?
Well, I mean, I get asked that a good bit, and I used to say, it feels like a lot of squish. But
Yeah.
if you wanted me to break it down, I did this with Mike not too long ago because he asked me like in detail that same kind of thing. And first off, when I unrack that much weight, I am right at 5 feet tall because of the spinal compression. I'm dropping, 5, 6, 7 inches in height.
Whoa.
I would have to set the bar height in the rack right at about where my nipple is. And when I would stand all the way up, it was barely clearing by maybe an inch. So that's how much of the squish it really is. As soon as I start down, after I've taken my breath, my vision goes like completely. It blurs almost instantly, and then I just don't see anything because when you're lifting heavy weights like that, your blood pressure can either quadruple, quintuple, somewhere in that range. And people think, well, how do you not have a stroke? And this is pretty universal for anybody that lifts heavier weights. Like 400 pounds to a smaller person can do this as well. But when you have that much intra-abdominal pressure increase, it pushes on your spine, which adds pressure to your cerebrospinal fluid, which goes up into your brain, and it equalizes that blood pressure increase. So that's pretty wild. That's why we see blood vessels bust in the eyes and nosebleeds happen because they don't have that equalizing pressure. There's no spinal fluid there. There's little fun
Interesting.
things there. But
Yeah, I never knew that. That is amazing.
yep. I always wanted to figure out. I was like, I want to make sure I'm not going to die, and I want to know why I'm not going to die doing this stuff.
I
Yeah,
never even thought about lifting that heavy to go that to even consider, but I'm glad you did.
yeah. I mean that's the mindset of the competitor, right? Most people that die, they don't make much progress after that. So that was going to hurt my
Yeah,
career.
that's how you thinking here.
Thinking ahead, yeah. But since I can't see, I'm only feeling, and I've got training partners on either side of the platform that are going to yell up in competition
Yeah,
to where I'm only listening for that. I know their voices, and as soon as I hear that, I'm going to come back up. And it changes a lot depending on the plates that are on the bar as well, and the kind of bar, because the competition bars we use there were either 65 pounds or 66, which is 30 kilos.
yeah,
Extra thick, very reinforced, usually about 8 foot long, so they could put more plates onto it. And the disc competition plates are super, super thin, so the plates are closer to the center, so the bar doesn't have to bend as much, which is way more stable. It got to the point where, the weights that I had to lift in competition, I wouldn't go to a competition if I didn't know they were going to have that specific equipment because I've tried to squat, over 1,000 pounds with just a 55-pound bar, which is already, a reinforced bar, but it's not enough. If they have regular 45s that are like an inch and a quarter wide, it's going to be loaded up all the way to the ends, and it looks like a bird flapping when I have that much weight on the
yeah,
bar. And it's scary not just for me, but everybody around me because it's going to get dumped somewhere because I'm going to fall over. So
yeah.
just for safety of myself and everyone else around, I couldn't go do those competitions.
That's
But yeah.
insane. I can't believe, like, man. I just think about like the weights move. Like you said, the weights, and I just went into my head into like seeing the weights bounce. And I've actually been in powerlifting gyms before, and I would see guys and see the weights, like when they're and I just see this movement of the bar bending. I'm like, that even holding that and that thing moving must feel like your whole body's gonna throw over. If you have 1,000 pounds on your back, Jesus, like I don't know what's gonna happen. Your spines are breaking. First of all, just that little piece right there that you told me that how the spine compresses that much, like 4 or 5 inches, and the spinal fluid going to the brain. That's why you don't have a stroke. I have been like, what? Is it possible these guys are gonna die? Like, is they get so wet? It's so great to hear that. That was a real learning moment. I'm gonna dive deeper into that after this, but Dr. Wilcox, thank you again for coming to the podcast. I'm sorry I was a mess jumping into this with you, but you were
You're great, man.
a good sport. I really appreciate it. I'm going to have this out soon. I can't wait. I'm going to tell people about spinal fluids to the brain when they're squatting. We're going to get a lot of love, a lot of love. All right, appreciate it, Doc.
All right, man. Thank you.